right. Welcome back to another episode of Friends from Work, a podcast about all things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, hosted by me, Robbie Earl, and by my longtime friend, Kyle Sconawill. Friend from work, I should say.
That's right.
I almost left out my parenthetical. I never leave out the
That's it. Start over.
Oh, gosh. And, it is fun saying that it's a podcast about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're talking about the multiverse today, as we'll discuss in a second. But I don't know. In some ways, the movie that we're going to be talking about, it feels the most MCU-ish, at least like central of any project that we've watched recently. So whether or not you enjoy the take on the MCU, I think it's, this whole section of the watch has been about kind of new characters and things. And it's nice to come back to some familiar faces and alternate versions of familiar faces.
Robbie, I'm curious from your perspective, in general, has your mind changed at all about Phase 4 now that we're completing this entire rewatch? I was thinking about you because I think there have been a lot of projects where when I rewatched it, it is only reaffirmed maybe what I felt the first time for the most part. And some of those have slid up and down in my rankings. And so anyways, I went to the ffwpodcast.com and I actually went to our rankings, which you hate. And I was looking at how, all these movies are lumped under tier 2, but I was looking at how those fall and how those shake out. And you and I have constantly shifted what actually would be a ranking within phase 2, tier 2, sorry. And I don't know, man, we need to reevaluate this. I think this is crazy. I thought Multiverse of Madness was better this time than any other time. Not that it was unbelievable, but amongst the tier 2 films, for me, I think I would slide it up now. Yeah. This is what we have right now, okay? You tell me, pay attention, ready? Love and Thunder is the very top of tier 2. Far From Home, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Marvels, Wakanda Forever, Multiverse of Madness, Age of Ultron, Quantumania, Doctor Strange, Cap 1, which is a lot to remember. But right away off the bat, I'm thinking like just because of time and what has happened, I think Quantumania would be the last movie in tier 2, I think. Like that would have to go down. Yeah. Like Doctor Strange, the first movie, might be a tighter film, probably. And then I thought this one could almost jump up, like over the Marvels and maybe even over Shang-Chi. I don't know.
Man, I love this. Okay, honestly, I think we put a pin in this because this is a whole, like I would like to have a larger conversation about Phase 4 as a whole. And we probably will some as we get into Multiverse of Madness, but I think I'm totally on the same page with you. I think that it's really interesting now, having talked through all these, having watched through them, even though we didn't do it all in one like fell swoop like we did with the Infinity Saga. It's still kind of interesting now to look back.
For sure.
And maybe
they all just have their things, That's what's so fascinating. They're all almost interchangeable in that if it's your scene, it's well done, it's fun, and they all have a little a little visual something, or but I'm not sure about this plot choice.
Well, and they do, like, I think something that we discussed early on that separates Phase 4 definitely from really all the phases of the Infinity Saga, I think. But certainly 2 and 3 is like, there is so much more of a stamp on most of these. Like I think that the big achievement of Marvel towards the tail end of the Infinity Saga was just such intense quality control, where it was like they found a way to make stuff that was almost always going to make almost everybody happy. Like if you wanted to go see a superhero movie, most of those movies you were going to walk away pretty happy with. And I think so much of Phase 4 is like, there are certain things where it's like, man, that's a weird call, but I kind of love it. Or, man, that's a weird call and I kind of hate it. And I feel like there's so much of that where it's like certain things, they're not better or worse even than Infinity Saga movies, but there are some that are just like, you have a different relationship with it. But I think that the beauty of like, and what I'm excited about with this movie is you and I have talked about like over and over again, how it's kind of harder to talk about a movie like Winter Soldier sometimes because like there's not really a lot of reason to dig real deep. Like it's like, yeah, this is just a very straightforwardly great movie. No one's really debating that. But I do think that these movies that are a little bit like stranger, pun intended, they make you dig in and figure out like what is this? Like what's the theme here? Like what are we trying to accomplish? Like is that like when we talked about Love and Thunder, like how much of what we're pulling from that is what Taika intended? How much does it even matter if we're talking about kind of like death of the artist? And I think that those are all questions that we never really found ourselves asking in the Infinity Saga. And maybe some people are glad that we didn't have to ask those questions in the Infinity Saga. But I do think it's made for some more interesting conversations when it comes, especially with films like this.
For sure. Okay, well, I rewatched Multiverse of Madness last night. Did you rewatch it as well? Or at least recently? Okay.
I did. Yeah. Before we jump in, 2 quick announcements on my side of things.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
One, just kind of state of the world here. This episode is coming out on Monday, the 24th?
Oh, gosh. Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
I'm excited. I've talked about this some in the past couple of weeks. Wednesday coming up is 1 month from Deadpool and Wolverine.
Okay.
Which is crazy. And I want us to celebrate that by formally releasing this little streamlined multiverse saga watch that I've discussed.
Okay.
And it's going to be out there. And here's the thing. If you want it, at least initially, because this is the easiest for us and I think it makes the most sense, it's going to appear on our Substack. If you're a patron, you'll get it also through Patreon. But if you are just a listener on the main feed, this is a push to go and subscribe to our newsletter. We've actually had a lot of folks subscribing lately, which makes me happy because I feel like it's always getting better. But that's announcement number 1. I've really enjoyed this. I think it's going to be fun. And it's about 15 projects overall if you take some of the Infinity Saga stuff that's relevant and add it.
That's pretty stripped down. Nice work.
I think it's going to be gives people about a month if they do want to do this. And
I was nervous
through.
You were going to say, here is my stripped down version. It's 33 projects. You can you can eliminate 4 of them.
Well, the thing is too,
whatever,
what I like, and I'm gonna specify this in our post with the order here, but you can basically, if you want, just start with the phase 4 stuff. And I still think it works, but I was watching through it and I thought it works a lot better if you watch it in the context of some of the setup that started earlier on. And it's just the movies that you would watch in the Infinity Saga are some of my favorites anyway. So I think really it could be like 7 or 8 projects if you want to cut that stuff. So announcement number 1, June 26th. To celebrate the month until Deadpool, we're going to have that out. But announcement number 2, because that kind of covers the MCU side of the prepping for Deadpool that we're wrapping up here today. We are also finally getting to Deadpool, which is really exciting.
Right. Here we go.
So a week from today, if you're listening to this episode on the day that we released it, we are going to have a very special episode getting our minds right for
Get your mind right.
Deadpool 1, which Kyle has still never seen.
My mind needs to get right.
So I'm really excited about that episode 1 because we just kind of get to talk a little bit and set the table. But 2, it is going to feature an interview that was really, really fun that I think people are going to enjoy. I recently got to sit down with Joe Kelly, who people will know as one of maybe the preeminent Deadpool writer on the comic side of things. He has been called the Chris Claremont of Deadpool, which is to say he didn't invent the character, but he defined him so thoroughly. Even like if you've seen the movie, like all of the core characters, a lot of the plot is pulled straight from his work. And he is currently writing a 3-issue miniseries that is starring Deadpool and Wolverine that's coming out currently at comic stores. So we got to talk about both of those, his history with the character, his take on the character, his take on the relationship between that character and Wolverine, and kind of how fruitful that can be. And he's just such a nice guy, kind of a comics legend in his own right. So that's going to be part of our Deadpool hype episode. And I wanted to give people a heads up now. We will also put on the Substack some links to comics you can get on Organic Price Books that will prep you really well for that episode, and also just if you want to know more about the Deadpool comics background. So we will have all that stuff out, but just know if you are interested in really digging in there, it would be fun for you to have read some of those comics beforehand. But again, we'll follow up there in the written word side of things. Those are my announcements.
Well, I'll just add that means the Monday after the 4th of July. So now I'm confused what day that is, but exactly maybe July 7 or 8. Fact check me. That's when we'll officially have a Deadpool 1 episode available. So July 8th. You're going to want to watch Deadpool again if you've seen it before that time. Probably the week of. And then that'll be a mega episode. My first reactions ever to Deadpool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're just right on the doorstep. Deadpool 2, some fun stuff on Friends from Work Plus, and then Deadpool and Wolverine, which I'm anxiously awaiting our screener, as you can see from the emails, I'm sure, that I've copied you on. Trying to make plans.
Same.
Trying to make plans. Do I need to book a plane ticket, Disney? That's what I need to know. Man. Do I need to book a plane ticket?
I'm going to book a plane ticket to everywhere they could possibly be giving us screeners, just to cover my bases.
We'll do all of them. And just do it in the order of the time changes, so you can still make it. We'll do California first, and then New York first. We'll quick get back out to California.
Yep.
For me, it's just I'm so busy, but I feel like this is something we got to watch together. So I really feel like even if I have a Nashville screener, I might need to do a Austin or LA trip with you. And here's the other thing, though. I don't know if you saw this. I think the world premiere, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg,
I did see
is
this.
actually the 22nd of July. Point being, it's only 4 days before the release again. So that means if we don't go to the premiere, our screener is going to be not until Tuesday at the earliest, probably, with a Thursday night release. So that'll be scramble mode to make sure we
that's about how Multiverse of Madness was. Like
we've done that a couple times. Spider-Man as well, maybe? Question mark?
Yeah, the ones that I feel like are super, super spoiler like heavy or have the potential. I feel like it's same thing like with Endgame. But I remember because some we've seen fairly like a very early, like a week or more. And then like Multiverse of Madness, I think we had 1 or 2 days max before it hit.
So you and I need to get to work. That's the point. We got a lot coming up here in the next month. This is going to be a really, really fun and busy month on so many levels for Friends from Work. So yeah, I won't say that. Yep. Just there's a lot. There's some stuff, but I'm not going to tease it yet. We'll just say we're working on some stuff. July is going to be awesome. Okay. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Robbie, I'll let you kind of take the lead here. I'll never forget watching this film with you and Candace in Austin and watching the beginning scene with Wanda revealing that she's wearing the Scarlet Witch outfit, and you're like, okay. And then her killing everyone at Comertage. And I remember just looking at you about halfway going like, oh no, like this is not a phase. They're leaning into this. Like that's when the horror hit me. Like, you remember that so much so that towards 80% of the film, I was like, oh no. Like this is irreversible. And then the famous TikTok video of me just collapsing on the hotel or the theater floor on the way out because that's what had happened to me. The shock of some of that has worn off, and it's allowed me to see some of the positive story elements that have come from that, and maybe what you'd even consider to be some of the logical story decisions regarding Wanda, now that the shock of that is worn off years later. You know, my wife still gets mad at certain things about it. I love that you kicked off the entire episode by talking about phase 4 being the phase of takes from directors. I'm fascinated to see if the back half of phase 5 and the early half of phase 6 is going to shift at all in that. Like, will Marvel take some of that as a negative, a critique, and then shift back towards what they consider to be safer, like Winter Soldier vibe? I'm interested to see if that has affected it at all. Like, as part of this reboot of sorts, like this break Marvel's been going through, will the tone shift? Will it change how directors, like how much freedom they have on these films? I'm curious about all of that, and we can get into that in the future. But I love that you started there, because this and Love and Thunder might be the pinnacle of what it looks like to take a Marvel Cinematic Universe character and formula and really let the director have a stamp for good or for bad. And this might be the pinnacle of that.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much in common when you look at those movies. And what I think is so funny about that is I almost always find people love one and hate the other. Like, it's
right. They should be so similar.
Yeah. But it's like, you know, and I get it because the style of them is very different. You know,
Correct.
like Thor is so like colorful and bright and silly. And this one is like, it's also silly, but in a way that's very much like a campy horror movie.
Very campy.
And that's, so
Thor is goofy. This movie's campy. There's a little bit of a difference there.
That's true. Because, I think some of the criticisms of Love and Thunder talked about it feeling like an extended SNL sketch, which is a different thing than how I think people that criticized Multiverse of Madness would have described that. Although even then, I mean, I'm excited. I don't know if we'll have time today, but to talk about the kind of Sam Raimi and Michael Waldron contributions here and what that means for the future. But
where do you want to start? I have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I know that you were indicating earlier that you had maybe an opening thought, unless we already covered that.
Yeah, we already covered it.
Okay, fair. I kind of on this one, I just want to dive in. I think I've got some notes that are more or less chronological, and I think that in doing that, we'll wind up talking about the bigger issues, and we can kind of sum it up at the end, if that works for you.
You love to see it. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness after a quick word from these sponsors.
Okay, so having watched this a few more times now, I've realized that, again, like Love and Thunder, maybe I'm projecting, but I do think that this movie it's doing something that's very specific, and I don't just mean stylistically. Like, I think that Raimi's obviously putting his Raimi spin on it, but I know that like Waldron got some flack for the script, and I think different people had different ideas of what they wanted it to be. And setting aside the actual writing and the dialogue and what your take is there, I feel like some people with this movie felt that it should have been more of like a tour through the multiverse. Like, we're seeing so many countless universes. Like, I'm
everything,
thinking of some,
everywhere, all at once. Yeah, which was
honestly,
the same year. Yeah,
which is crazy, and not that. Like, I think they came out pretty close to each other even within that year. If I remember.
But that was the criticism I remember. It's like, in the same year, here's how you make a multiverse movie, and it's not this.
Yeah, which I mean is fair. I don't think anybody wants to have to weigh those movies against each other.
For sure. And it's fair from the perspective of the actual multiversal stuff. If you do want a traversal, that's the movie to do it. This is not it.
Yeah. And I think that on the one hand, like in defense of Marvel's decision not to do that, like now seeing the timeline, I feel like that would have been a little premature. Like, I think it makes sense if we're going to do something that is really like everything everywhere all at once level, and the way that we're not just traversing, but experiencing all these different realities. I think that would need to be closer to whatever Secret Wars looks like anyway. So I kind of liked this both as like a little tease, but also what I realized is it's not just like they...
Well, in a similar tone to Secret Invasion, I do wonder if in general would the project be viewed slightly more fondly if it was a different title. Like if Secret Invasion was called The Origin of Nick Fury, or
right.
Nick Fury, Where It All Began.
Yeah.
If you called it that, and then if this was just something different to where people don't have the multiverse expectation, then you still get into some multiversal stuff. And it's like, oh, Doctor Strange doesn't know much about it. And that's really fascinating. But again, to put it as like, this is the multiverse movie, I think that's what happens in people's brains. And then it feels like a letdown. Because I'm with you. I think in some ways, if it was called Doctor Strange 3, it's actually doing some stuff really well.
Or 2.
Specifically, sorry, Doctor Strange 2. Sorry, doing some of the like Christine stuff really well and kind of tying up some of those storylines that have nothing to do with the multiverse.
Yeah. And I mean, they kind of do in a way where like, I understand why that's the direction that Waldron took, even with the multiverse. Cause I this was the first time I thought, when they first...
But title wise, do you agree that could make a difference?
I do, but I wonder now, like, because the sense I get is that they, and this was, I'm sure, the case with Secret Invasion too. Like, they threw out all those titles so early in like 2019, and I bet in most of those cases they were like, "This is the title, and we're going to kind of write a movie to fit this title, or write a show to fit this title." And I think that. You're right. The title does give you that sense that we would be looking at something that's more like traversal oriented. But I kind of feel like what Waldron did is he took an alternate meaning of that title. Like, instead of it being like, oh, there's so much madness because there's so much multiverse, I think it's more like the multiverse that they are introducing here, and that they do show for the first time us traveling to, and the madness, which I think is Wanda. And I kind of buy that. Like, I see what that is and how it kind of makes it more of it's a different spin on the title, but I kind of agree with your larger point, which is I think people were expecting more of like
even if you don't change the title, it's the expectations. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, Waldron is probably accurately representing what he interpreted the title to be, but it misled some people, not at his fault.
For sure. I think to that end, what I appreciate about what Waldron's doing here is he's digging into things that we've only seen like briefly explored in Stephen Strange's other appearances, or things that we haven't seen explored since the first movie. Which, like we've said, it was so weird. This is the longest we've ever had between a first installment and a second installment of a particular series, just because of when Infinity War fell.
Yeah, right.
And so I liked the callback there, but I think that what he did is he looked at the multiverse not as just like a look how crazy and zany we could be, although I think Raimi brought a lot of that to the table. He looked at it from the perspective of like endless, like what do you do when there are endless, like what could have beens out there? Like if you're somebody that's prone to like, if you're cerebral in the way that Stephen Strange is, and you are made aware of all of these different ways things could have panned out, how does that impact like this idea of contentment or happiness, as they say throughout the whole movie? And that's not even us reading into anything. Like I realized on this watch over and over and over, he's repeating back this question of "Are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy?" all coming from that first wedding scene. And looking at the multiverse through that lens, I think is really creative. It's a much more like intimate and kind of moving, like focused way of exploring that instead of trying to make it fully like another like an amped up version of like the Loki season 1 finale where it's like, oh my gosh, everything's so out of hand, like it's running away from us. Like I think that's maybe what I thought we would be coming out of Multiverse of Madness with. But I think that, yeah, for better or worse, Waldron decided to do something else entirely that is really like, what does the multiverse mean for Stephen Strange and Wanda Maximoff?
I think you're right. I think that's a great point. And I do think that contributed to why I watched it a little more enjoyably this time, because that's very similar to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is, you know, if there's all these infinite possibilities, what is your purpose? What is the meaning of life? And Loki wrestles with that too. Like even that shot at the end of Loki season 2, when Mobius doesn't know like where his place is anymore. Like, do I go back to the sacred timeline? Do I keep working here now that the threat that I like dedicated myself to? And I do think it's a fascinating thing to explore with characters like Wanda and Doctor Strange, where especially a Doctor Strange type character where you are going to be the guy who checks in, is all knowing, is cerebral, but kind of always has things together, or like, you know, Peter Parker goes to him to ask for advice and ask for these things. And now that like the Thanos is over and you did that and you've lost some people because of it, I could easily buy, this is kind of me, to be honest, I could easily buy that Stephen Strange would be like wrestling with big questions now of what is my purpose anymore? And like, am I happy? Am I content to just live a single life in this sanctum, defending these little monsters that, you know, attack and these little problems and solving them. And that being my purpose. And I do love the movie wrestling with that. That's why I think my favorite conversations are those with him and Wong, you know, like at the very end, where after you've seen all these multiverses and what this could be like, all these universes, that I still choose to be content in this one. So I do love starting there, because that is what the movie is ultimately wrestling with. And that's why I say the title is misleading, because I think even myself included went in with different expectations. But if it was Doctor Strange 2, I love the idea of him wrestling with, is he happy? That's a perfect character for that. And then contrasting all of that, like you said, to Wanda, who has gone through stuff and now finds out that maybe there are solutions in the multiverse where she can live a life in a different universe with her kids or with Vision, and what that would look like. And contrasting those two opinions of like what Wong says versus the way Wanda's handling it, right? Like choosing to be content in this one.
Yeah. I mean, well, and I think that's the, like, that's what I love about that character mashup is I don't think I had ever, like, it's such a great way of digging back into the history of the MCU and teasing something out. Like, I do think that there were so many great beats between really, like, from the start of phase 3 through Endgame that we just only had so much time to dig into and maybe didn't even really have time to recognize. Like, I don't know that Strange and Wanda ever had a scene together where they actually interacted before this movie. I don't think that they did. Like, they were both at like the battle at the end of Endgame, but as far as I know,
and the funeral scene.
But in terms of like them talking,
right.
But like the fact is, like, Strange is the one that gave Thanos the time stone that allowed Thanos to do what he did to Vision and to Wanda by proxy. And that's really intense. And that's not something that I had, like, the whole, you know, kind of looking at
that decision twice in this movie.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. Like, when I say kind of going through this chronologically, like, I realized at the start, like, the dream he's having, that's not a dream. And then that immediately followed up by the wedding and the conversation that he has with the doctor. they immediately look at Strange as the one that's like making the hard calls, but generally the hard calls require the sacrifice of others. Like, I'm not saying that he's doing it not heroically, because like in Infinity War, he does something that he knows will cause him to be dusted. But ultimately, he also knows that it's going to be Tony that has to make the ultimate sacrifice. And he knows that like it's Vision that will have to make the ultimate sacrifice. And then even in like No Way Home, you look at it like he's the one he's willing to send all these villains back to their deaths, and Peter isn't. And then he's ultimately like, he's not happy about it, and it's a really moving moment. But like all of that results in no harm to Strange.
It's a cool question.
It's Peter that loses his identity.
It's a great question for that other doctor to ask, because he's not a villain. I don't think the movie's trying to paint him as the bad guy, but wrestling with, at least challenging him to where he kind of looks at him and goes, we were at war. Like, I made the only play we could have. But it's that little bit of defense of like, why are you questioning me on that, you know?
Well, and what I love about this as a follow-up to the first movie is like, and it's in that line where he's like, Stephen Strange, the best doctor and the best superhero, like, or the best surgeon and the best superhero. Like, it is like this movie does such a good job of treating Stephen Strange as a character that is like unique from others within the MCU. Like, sometimes, especially in movies like Infinity War and Endgame, when you just have so many characters, I think that people are primarily distinguished by their power set. Like, you just get these little moments, but it's like, you know, sometimes everyone's kind of quippy and like they just don't have that much time to otherwise separate it out. But I like that we're returning to Stephen Strange not just as the magic one, but like the one that is like, he started this with such a chip on his shoulder. Like, he's always been pretty cocky. And the whole theme of the first Doctor Strange is like, it's not about you, and him kind of understanding that he has to let go of parts of that, but it's still in him, you know, and it's not like when we have those moments, we are totally, irrevocably changed as people. So I like that, like, the people that have known him for a long time, like this doctor, before he became a superhero, know that that's probably still in there. And so, like, it would be weird if, like, the person that you work with that you, like, kind of hate because he was always such a jerk, then, like, becomes the guy that gets to decide, like, how the fate of the universe, like, unfurls. Like, you're going to have some, like, misgivings about that. And I like
he's celebrated for it.
Yeah. And then I think, like, to introduce that question there, and then later to show to Steven other versions of himself that kind of are more villainous, like some more than others, but like that then, like, he kind of starts to look at himself the way he thinks people may be looking at him.
There's one shot that I kind of love with all my heart. It reminds me a little bit of Thor. It's right after that conversation at the wedding, and he has the conversation with Christine, and she says, "Are you happy?" And then the monster attacks, and he kind of smirks. Doctor Strange looks off the balcony, and he's like, "Oh," and then he gets to do his, like, cool flip into his outfit and go fight it, and it's right away, like, very arrogant, like, "Oh, this is no big deal. I'll take care of it." Like, he literally says to America after winning the fight, he goes, "These monsters, I don't have to worry about because I just took care of them." Like, he says something like,
"Yeah, like,
the monsters
obviously
I can take care of. Obviously, I did, but it's you that I have a question about." It's like there's still such arrogance in that, and it's almost like, to your point, even after the moving conversation from the doctor, he, like, that little smirk to me shows like he's still a little full of himself. Like, he likes being the celebrity and likes that everyone's gonna watch him jump off this balcony and fly and look what I can do, and, like, fill up Christine's glass with wine, even though she could get wine from the bar. It's still like, and then that's why Christine kind of almost rolls her eyes for a second when they're under attack. It's like, oh, of course this has to happen now during my wedding. It's
Uh-huh.
still about him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like him save. I mean, again, it's so similar to him as a doctor. Like, I think back to that conversation in the hallway when he's talking to her about, like, you know, I'm working on like procedures that are moving medicine forward, and you want me to go and like treat people coming in for gunshot wounds. And she's like, oh yeah, just saving lives, you know, because that doesn't matter. But it's like, to him, he's always been like a greater good guy. Like, he's always like, I'm the one that can both like see what needs to be done and do it. Like, and in that way, he and Tony have a lot in common. And so I think that to see that again here, and for them to have that conversation and the line about he has to be the one holding the knife, it is like, it's a very, you know, no pun intended now, like cutting remark, because it is like,
that's pretty good.
it's a, I think that is the core of the character. And that's why I really appreciate Waldron leaning into that instead of just saying, oh, now we're going to put Doctor Strange in a bunch of new crazy situations and have him just be the perspective for the audience. Like, I like that it's about who he is. And again, contrasted with Wanda, who's never had the opportunity to be that person. Like, Steven is the one who's always been in control and got to do things to other people and for them. Wanda's the one that's only ever had things done to her and taken from her.
Wanda is in the Olympics. She's at least medaling in the Olympics for most loss, most suffering. She'd be up there with probably Spider-Man, Thor for sure. You know, we'd have to make a list of who's lost the most for sure. Honestly, Robbie, for me, that's part of the reason why I think I just prefer the Waldron aspect of it more than the Raimi aspect of it. And that's a preference thing, because some people are totally opposite, think that Waldron ruined Raimi's movie. But I think it's lines like that. It's the cutting remark. It's the smirk. It's some, in general, I don't have a problem with the writing in this movie. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. I like Waldron's writing.
Yep. It's maybe a hot take, but
I do think that, like, the Raimi side of it there in that scene just before we move away from the wedding, because I really do like that scene a lot. The one Raimi moment that I love, and it's a combo, but the line after that of, well, but you still didn't get the girl, and then the immediate shift to her actually walking down the aisle.
I don't know how to interpret that line. Is he trying to be a dick?
He's trying to be a dick. Yeah. But it's also like,
because they've got so like nonchalant. I don't know. I've never known how to read that line.
I love it because it's such a perfect way to like Strange is pushing back and saying, like, look, you know, it's kind of this, like, I'm the superhero here. Like, I knew what I was doing. Like, I made the right play. I always make the right plays. Like, there's a lot kind of in between the lines there, and I like that he still, again, has like he has like a jab left where he's like, well, like, Mr. Big Shot, like, you still didn't get the girl. And that's such a great reveal because we didn't know whose wedding it was until that moment. And it's like, it's brutal to watch. And I think that, like, the trick there of the transition is very Raimi-esque.
Let's shift to the Wanda side of it then. Because the next thing we do is we find out that she's behind it. You get the shout out to WandaVision straight up. And it's a dream, which at the first viewing, you know, we thought was just a dream. But then you kind of learn, well, it's maybe a glimpse into a multiverse. So it's really not just haunting her in her dreams, but it's showing her that it's possible elsewhere to be living that kind of life instead of the one she's in.
Yeah.
How did you view this viewing from the perspective of a step after WandaVision? Like, how does Wanda fit in this movie now, logically, plot-wise, to you?
I love that when we started WandaVision, we had just completed this, like, self-contained kind of satisfying saga that was the Infinity Saga. And then this series slowly unveiled the post-blip world, and it planted these seeds, a lot of which we've maybe forgotten about, and all the craziness of Phase 4. And one of the reasons I like ending with Multiverse of Madness here is it's like as Strange remembers Wanda, like after that line of like, oh, it's witchcraft, we do know somebody. We have the memory of that series kind of coming back to us.
I love
and
the runes
this, like,
shout out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like before we met all these new heroes we've talked about, before we explored new dimensions, before there was Spider-Man and the multiversal counterparts, like before even like the first steps towards like building the legacy of Steve Rogers and Tony Stark in our watch order, like we saw Wanda like create this whole new reality so that she could have the perfect life that was stolen from her. And it's like, though she, to talk about like the transition from that to now, it's like, yes, she kind of dealt with that pain, but there was also more lingering at the end of WandaVision than I think we were made to understand, like before this movie came out.
Well,
and like in
the
retrospect.
and the Darkhold, you know, that's the other.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like Agatha warned her that, like, the question is like, don't you know what you've unleashed? Like the Scarlet Witch would herald doom and exceed the powers of the Sorcerer Supreme. Like that's a really intense way to end the series for Wanda to just be like,
I do love
it.
I love they included that line in particular. I mean, how fitting is that line for this film?
Right.
Yeah. You know, it's just you have to admit that she does make peace with some of it. You know, she does let Westview go. She lets the residents leave. She gets rid of the hex. Like clearly she's learning. But yes, is there some lingering pain? And then is the Darkhold able to then infect that pain and grow to where we see this today? I think the answer has to be yes, obviously, according to Waldron. But to the degree you buy that, heavily influences your feelings on this film.
For sure. And I still think that's the biggest obstacle because, I mean, if you have to explain the connection that much and like make sense of it, then there probably is a flaw there in the relationship between the two projects. But I do think if you have the time to dig in and rewatch these in conjunction, what Waldron's doing is not just one. I think it's clear that he's rooting what's happening to her in the Darkhold. And I feel like you get that like towards the end of the movie when she's like, oh my gosh, I would never hurt you. I would never hurt anybody. And it's like, she's been so unaware of what she's even been doing.
Yeah. Not to mention, as a side note, just an all-time scene. Like actually moved Annika and I this viewing where, she is so like, to your point, the Scarlet Witch is so taken over that it takes that kind of moment. And then her acting there is amazing. The look on her face of like, no, I would never hurt anybody. And then you look, the camera pans around. It's like, you've killed 1 million people. And this other Wanda is laying on the ground injured and your boys are terrified of you. And then that hit her, that really worked for me. This like, oh my gosh, it's that feeling of how the heck did I get here? Like how am I standing here at this moment right now? And then just the horrible shame and regret that she feels in her face. You can see in her face immediately of like, oh no.
Yeah.
I have chills right now, actually.
No, it is brutal.
Once I get over the fact that Wanda's a bad person, I still love her so much. I think Elizabeth Olsen's one of the best actors in the MCU. I think her outfit looks unbelievable. Like she looks like such a badass. I love how powerful they make her. Shout out to our Dark Phoenix episode on Friends from Work Plus.
Wow.
But I love like the hierarchy being set, like even from Agatha saying like her I love when Doctor Strange goes like, man, what's going on? Oh, we could ask Wanda. I love even the shout out of saying like, I could call Spider-Man, I could call Hawkeye, but I'm going to call you because we know what you're capable of. I love when she reveals to be the Scarlet Witch and Wong then goes to Kamar-Taj and says, the Scarlet Witch is a being of unfathomable power and magic. Like if she could rewrite this all by herself, like basically being like, oh no, like the panic on Wong's face. I love that being like, this is, so again, set the hierarchy and then follow it. And it feels like that is the hierarchy they have set. Because even what she did with Thanos before the Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
So I just love everything about Wanda. I refuse to believe she's dead. I love her acting. I love her. I even like the line she has in this movie. I mean, her facial expressions of, I don't think that's very fair. And some of the smiles of like, that's what every mother does. It's like, okay, whoa. Man. It's like, it's so creepy in this one little I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, easy. And I love how Strange plays it. The second Strange realizes, I love how it's revealed that she accidentally says the name and says the lying's the hardest part. And then how Strange then plays it from that point on. It's like Strange becomes very clear.
Yeah.
Like he's walking on eggshells now. Like from that point on, it's like, how am I going to handle this? And I love how he handles it as an actor, Benedict, but also the writing of like, Wanda, you're starting to sound like our enemies, like, don't like, this is not you. This corrupts everything. And it's corrupting you too. Oh, just everything about that. I love. Sorry. I had to get that out. I had to say that all.
No, I think that's exactly right. And what I love is that it's the Darkhold. Like the Darkhold is playing enough of a role here for me to feel like Wanda's character is not irreparably damaged. And that's what I think maybe people didn't like. And again, I'm not blaming viewers. Maybe that just didn't come across as much until you've had a chance to watch it a few times. But
like
so
there's a world where she is
doing.
Alive and the Darkhold's now gone and she doesn't act like this.
Right. And I think that like it's okay that she had a fall from grace here, because it's like we did see elements of this in WandaVision.
For sure.
But this is like she's now reached like a new level of power personally, aside from the Darkhold, because of what we saw in WandaVision. And now she has the Darkhold. So I think that like it's a new thing for her to deal with. And also what I like sort of two things. One, I think some of our best moments in the MCU have been heroes kind of making wrong steps. Like,
we haven't had it like this, but yes.
Well, no, but I just think you have to find creative ways to do it, but it's like if you look at Age of Ultron or Civil War, it's like there are there are times where Tony and Cap just do the wrong thing. Yep. And it's not to this level, but that kind of is the second piece of this, where it's like I love the Doctor Strange dichotomy, because even the final scene of WandaVision with her doing the Doctor Strange thing of like reading up on the Darkhold, but with her astral form, like there is so much that they have in common at that point, where it's like she now realizes how powerful she is and is supposed to be, and kind of like doesn't heed. Like it flips this like empowering moment at the end of WandaVision on its head, in the same way that like Stephen Strange's has been, where it's, yes, you do have this power. Like, yes, you don't need you don't need anybody to tell you who you are. But like also you need some checks. And she just goes fully into it and then finds herself like it all gets mixed up, like her own motives and whatever the Darkhold's wanting from her.
That last shot that kills me is when she finally reaches Wundagore or whatever in the temple, and Wong's like, "Is that not enough? Like we've done all this, and you're like, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe she's gonna turn around." And then she goes, "No, I was meant to rule," and like levitates up to the top. And I'm like, "Oh no!" That's what I remember being like. That's it. It's over. It's like a hopeless. Like that was your last chance. That was your last chance.
That conversation between them, but the conversation between Strange and Wanda in the apple orchard, but then really the conversation they're having through the whole movie, like down to him,
see each other,
like dream walking, and it really is like, it's such a great, like, from her perspective, I understand, especially with her being like corroded by the Darkhold, like Steven is again showing up and telling her that she has to sacrifice, like in the same way that like the movie starts, the same way with like Infinity War. It's like he's so good at like pointing out like, oh, this is the thing, like America, you just have to die so that we can have your power and save everything,
right?
And like Wanda,
the other
and it's not that callous, but like from their perspective, it's like, and so Wanda's like, okay, well, and that's the whole, like, all of this for a girl you met yesterday.
Right.
Like,
and adding in the detail of the 838 Strange, who rose to so much power that literally destroyed a universe kind of thing. And then had to then humbly submit. So like, that's an interesting added wrinkle to this too. He meets another Strange who was all powerful.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the wrinkle of the what if version too. And it's like, you're getting a pretty accurate picture of this Doctor Strange as a character is and what he's capable of. And I do like them pointing out, I love the line from America to Christine saying, this Strange is different. Like, this is the one that is different than the other ones. I love that kind of stuff.
And Xavier.
Yes, which is a huge highlight on this rewatch because of the X-Men stuff we've been in.
Yeah.
Not only is he great, hold on. Everything about that I think is a huge win because it's cool to get the theme. It's cool to get the old yellow cart.
And then
when
he does the like waves coming out from his head when he does the like mental projection, which is straight from the cartoon.
And then when no one else trusts Strange, he does. I love that. And
we'll find out what kind of Doctor Strange you are.
And he says the same line, which is so good. Just because someone stumbles doesn't mean they've lost their way, which is like, that made my heart so happy.
Yeah.
And then honestly, it's insane to say this, but I kind of loved the whole sequence of Wanda murdering everyone. I know like those actors were bummed that they weren't in it longer and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I again, because it's establishing, like, I love the establishing of the power where Strange, like a couple times where like a few characters go, we're not worried about your little witch. And Strange is like, no, you should be worried. Like, this is a little bit different than you're used to thinking. And then Waldron and Raimi double down on it, which is like, she does show up and she brutally and instantly murders everybody. Hence the coolest shot of the movie, the what mouth, where it's like, okay. And then that look on John Krasinski's face of like, uh-oh, like this is different than what we were thinking it would be, you know?
Well, no. And maybe this is kind of a headcanon projection thing, but I realized the other thing I like about the Xavier element and making it, like, I'm not saying that they're making this the universe that X-Men, like the animated series operates in, especially now that we have 97. But I do like that they're trying to say this is, you know, the almost same version of Xavier that we got in the cartoon, because it kind of, for me, and again, this probably is headcanon-y, but it also addresses any uneasiness I've ever had about like some of the silliness in this portion of the movie with like the Illuminati stuff. Because I realized like a lot of it is like kind of intentionally cartoony. Like the way that some of the Illuminati members introduce themselves, and it's so like melodramatic. Like she throws the shield and Reed like teleports in, and
I like Doctor Strange being cocky and arrogant there, but I still don't love some of the actual dialogue choices. The Lumawati, like that stuff. Yeah, I still don't.
It's strange.
Yeah, Bart's strange. Robbie, here's the thing. My camera's overheating again. We're gonna lose it, and you have a phone call to our listeners, which I apologize, in 6 minutes, which sucks. So we have you have 6 minutes left to tell our listeners what you want to communicate about this film. Go.
I know. Okay, well, that's one thing. I think looking at that as just like looking at each universe as being different and like having a different flavor, I think is kind of fun. And so I sort of like the 838 universe just being a little bit of a Saturday morning cartoons vibe, and everything's a little heightened with the melodrama. Okay. So that's one thing. I also like in that whole sequence, the Ultron Wanda connection, like she crushes the Ultron head.
Yes,
and, like,
my wife pointed that out. Annika turns to me, Wanda hates Ultron. I was like, I forgot about that.
And like, I also noticed in this watch how much the movie is like, I think the reason in part that we don't see so many universes, at least beyond that one sequence, is because it's almost doing like a Christmas Carol thing for Strange. Like, in terms of he starts off with like the kind of Bob Marley, like ponytail version of him. And then you move on with like the version of him in 838 that he hears about. And then the version that he finally meets like in the last, and what they all teach him about like the person he wants to be. And then the kind of like waking up to a new day thing at the end. So like the movie's just doing some interesting things that I think, again, maybe your projection, but the more I dig in, I like those. I love like how New York centered a lot of it is. Like even when they're traveling to different universes, like I like some of the callbacks to prior Strange stuff. I love all the different ways we see him utilizing magic, even though some of it's silly with like the snakes and stuff. It's just kind of like, it's fun to see him do things other than like
less silly once you've seen What If.
Yeah, true.
In a cool way, I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I would say I think I love, like, I think we should have another episode talking about the incursion of it all.
Yeah.
Because I really like looking at this in terms of what we're learning about the multiverse.
Feels
and
like
maybe that's something we talk about before Deadpool and Wolverine.
Or I was going to say, it feels like a perfect post Deadpool and Wolverine, like summer break. Like here now we've seen what happened. Like, how does this all tie in kind of thing? For sure. I'll just say in closing here, 3 minutes left. And I'm so sorry, listeners. I hate doing that, but work, life.
Hey, limitations breed creativity.
Yeah, well, that was great what you just said. I think everything I said in the main episode, I stand by. Just know the context of the original initial reactions episode was that I was so traumatized by the Wanda thing that I was really wrestling with that. So that affected everything. It clouded everything. Mm-hmm. I really do like this movie more. I said that I think I would personally, and we got to get together. This is another episode. I would move it up in the tier 2 list towards the very top of it. I found myself way more entertained by it than Shang-Chi, even though Shang-Chi might be tighter.
Yeah.
But a lot of the still the same things apply. Like it was everything we saw with Doctor Strange. Christine's a huge win. When he says I love you in every univerce, legitimately moves me for whatever reason. That works like crazy.
I think the face your fears Doctor Strange thing works for me.
Yep. It's again, that's why I say move it up, because Love and Thunder is the only other Phase 4 film besides No Way Home that has that same feel where I can actually get emotional, like choked up.
Right.
And like that works for me. Christine works for me. The Illuminati stuff works for me. Wanda, I don't know about her being a villain, but I've bought it more with time, and her acting and all that stuff is such a huge win just to have her in the movie. Mm-hmm. And I still would just close it by saying there are still some of those things that like just aren't my preference. Like it is a little campy, like the America still thing, like is cheesy to me and not in a cool way, not in an endearing way.
Although I think the story beat there is great. Like not the zombie part, but what he's doing, what he's saying to America. I
think him harnessing the souls is badass. Like I kind of love it.
Yeah.
And I love Wong being like Strange and showing up, and how that actually juxtaposed to the trailer, which you thought he was pissed at Strange, but he's actually excited for Strange to show up in that moment because they don't show him smiling in the trailer. There still are just things that haven't changed for me. Like some of the, like, I don't fully understand the montage sequences with the electric guitar, like I know that's a tone, it's a thing, but I don't fully get it, if that makes sense. So like that, I don't need to reiterate all that because that hasn't fully changed, but I am more and more appreciating what the movie is doing. Does that make sense? So I'm moving it up despite a few things. Like visually, by the way, there are some things that look really cool, and then there are just some CGI issues that I'm going to blame on COVID. Like there are just some things that look green screened that really shouldn't.
I noticed that more now, I would say. And part of the, like, that's kind of a shame to me because I think I was saying on our last episode or whenever I was talking about rewatching the Raimi Spider-Mans recently, like I think he's so good at directing some of these action sequences.
Yeah.
And I think that is lost a bit here because of some of the, not just the CGI like looking bad, but I think just the CGI use in general.
Yeah, like there's a shot where they are on the rooftop with the dead Strange, and that's clearly not in New York on a rooftop. And I just wish like Raimi of all people should have forced that they go to a rooftop, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you compare it to like the Spider-Man 2.
Right. Anyways,
I should say, by the way,
I'm not reinventing the wheel. It's just I like it more than I used to.
Yeah. I just found out that my call got pushed back by half an hour. But now we've kind of gone through it, so it's weird. Maybe we could always schedule a call for an hour after.
I actually did that. I scheduled it and then pushed it back.
But
surprise.
No, I think everything you pointed out is fair. Like this is one where I don't even really disagree on those takes, but I do think that.
And the music is good, right? But it's not overly memorable. It's not like
I really like this. To me, feels like exactly the right project for Danny Elfman.
Okay, but okay? Would you say it's a top 10 score of the 50 projects or whatever we're at? I don't know. It's good. It's good.
Probably not top 10, but I would say like
above average.
Yeah. It's like certainly it's better than Age of Ultron. Like I think that there are moments here that are really fun, that are very Elfman specific. Like I think the whole music battle thing, like from a score perspective, it is really fun.
I appreciate the WandaVision shout out to Christoph Beck, and I appreciate the one Doctor Strange shout out to Giacchino that we get. I do like those.
And this was prior to the Miss Marvel X-Men theme shout out. So I think this is the first time we got that.
Yep.
But yeah, I like that. Actually, the question that I'm glad we have like a few minutes to talk about, or a few seconds, because I know your camera's dying. As we end, maybe just be thinking about, I was talking to Candace, Waldron is clearly still writing Secret Wars, and I'm not really sure what the status is of the movie that would be King Dynasty. Maybe it still is King Dynasty.
You know what? It's not called King Dynasty, but I literally today saw that Benedict Cumberbatch said he is excited to begin filming in 2025 for Avengers.
Oh, wow. So not Secret Wars. So
I think the first Avengers. It might be a part 1 and part 2 now. Who knows? But
yeah, that's fun. Well, so that's like Waldron is still around. He's still clearly like a big guy for Feige. And I think that Raimi came out of this, like whatever narrative was around this movie, it's almost the opposite of whatever narrative was around Taika. Like I feel like after Love and Thunder, a lot of people were like, probably need like less Taika. Whereas I think that like we will definitely get another Raimi movie in the MCU, I think. Because there were so many, like I remember the reviews when they first came out, so many called out his direction as being like a really fresh thing. Now, again, I understand why people would not like it, but I think that like it was enough, and this movie made so much money for like a Doctor Strange movie.
Our most listened to episode ever, still to this day.
I mean, so my question for you is, taking that as a given, and assuming that we are getting another Sam Raimi movie at some point in the MCU, what movie do you think that should be?
I think that he is a master when the story is somewhat isolated. Like I think that this film having a few flaws when he has to juggle a lot of different MCU characters, and like the way Spider-Man 3, again, I know there's studio things, like gets a little off the rails when a lot of stuff happens, like Sandman shows up and that doesn't seem to be a strength. So like I've read reports of him doing Secret Wars. That seems like a disaster to me.
Agreed.
Like I don't want him trying to balance the history of the MCU and going back through it all. It takes a really specific person, as we talked about so many times with the Russos.
Yeah.
I'm more inclined for someone like Moorhead and Benson, even though they haven't shown it on a crazy level, but just someone who's going to balance those characters. That being said, Spider-Man 2 exists. Spider-Man exists.
Yeah.
This movie's pretty good. Like he's made some bangers and some pretty good films. And I think he really flourishes when he doesn't have to do that stuff. So what would that be? That you can talk while I think for 1 second.
We have Spider-Man 4 coming up without a director. Ostensibly.
I think a fresh take on Spider-Man would be fun. That's not because he couldn't do it, but just like
it would be hard for him to outdo what he's already done.
Right,
so
and then start over with Spider-Man. Like we're wanting that vibe, but from somebody else now.
Yeah. I would love to see him, like the only draw to Secret Wars, and I just don't think that this is at all worth it. But like it would be fun to see him get to join up with Toby again in some respect, but I just don't think that would be worth.
Toby will be in that movie, but he can't be the main character. Like that can't be the selling
exactly.
point,
And so that's like, it's just not worth like, but that's the only reason why like I totally agree that like the reason the Russos were so well suited for Infinity War and Endgame, in my opinion,
I'm gonna Google it,
is because they have such a grounded approach.
And because they had that history with Captain America, I think too, like with the writers too.
But like, yeah, that's true. The Marks McFeely is hard to discount, obviously. But I just think like that creative team in general, I guess, versus like really any, like, because Raimi, I know, had a decent hand and like I think he was fairly involved with some of the story calls from listening to Waldron discuss this. Like, I know that, like, the beat you were talking about with Black Bolt losing his mouth was a Raimi thing. Like, I think he
really, I do like that.
Like, he like gets, but I think that you're right. Like, those things are fun, but whenever he can kind of be zany with not a ton of consequences, like, that's what makes him so well suited for like a movie like this, where all this stuff happens, but most of it happens in other universes. Or like,
I mean, could he do like a Blade or a Midnight Suns thing? Let me keep thinking.
He could. I could see Blade. I don't know that Raimi's well suited for a team movie.
I know. That's why I'm trying to rule out some of these.
I would be happy for him to do a third Doctor Strange, I think. Although there's a part of me that, like, again, looking at this as, oh, he's exploring different things in different universes and letting it kind of have a different stamp because of that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just looked. I don't know.
Like, I almost kind of want... I kind of want, like, Derrickson to come back and do the next Doctor Strange, not because we need, like, a change, but just because I think that, like, I don't know. Like,
he also really cared about that too. Like, I think he would do it, right? Like, gladly.
Well, and that's a movie, talking about some that have improved for me. That movie has gotten significantly better to me since we did our initial Infinity Saga rewatch.
How about, would you prefer this movie or that one? They're right there.
Man, it used to not even be close. And I think this one, but I don't know. It's like
by the way, on the Sam Raimi front, this is going back. The only movie when I was going through that whole list that I thought might work would be Fantastic Four. Although I'm super stoked with what's happening, but I'm trying to think of something kind of quirky where, like,
that's
Raimi
true.
would approach it with sincerity, you know? Like, I don't see him doing a super cynical film.
Yeah. Well, and that's
but
why
that's a team up
it's
movie too. And I don't know. There's also probably some projects that aren't named yet, you know, like,
for
2026 isn't that far away.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, even just dream casting, you know, like, I'm just thinking of all the characters that he could continue with.
And
like,
I'm thinking too, I don't know.
I mean, I think that,
I'm trying to think who's super grounded, but has a little bit of a fantastical element. Like, it's not grounded like Daredevil grounded.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a Daredevil take if he did a certain thing. Like, because again, Raimi doesn't have to be, like, Spider-Man 2 and the first Spider-Man, like, they have elements that are kind of dated and campy in a certain sense. But it's not like they're like so goofy that it colors the whole thing. Like, so I think he would know how to set that aside to a degree. But I do think it needs to be something that is focused enough, like a Daredevil, like, where it's like, okay, this is the story of a person primarily.
That's why that one was on my mind,
because that's what works so well in this movie.
I know. Like, yeah, that's fascinating discussion for another day. I was looking through even more of them. I'm like Brave New World maybe is grounded, but then, like, I don't want that movie to have any camp, really. Like, that's not a campy movie. I don't know. I gotta go.
Maybe Thor. He could maybe do Thor.
I thought that too. I can't get the George Miller thing out of my head, and I'm thinking about. Trust me, I just read the list and I was trying to process all of it. I mean, that could work maybe.
But yeah, we've like, look, we got ourselves a bonus 10 minutes here.
Yeah, we did it. Thank you. Everybody, this is the time to get involved. That's all I'll say. Get involved. July is going to be crazy, and there are so many different outlets that I don't want you to be missing things. So, like, again, we have a YouTube channel. Go to theffwpodcast.com for contact stuff. Discord if you want conversation going. Our newsletter is incredible for just staying up to date with the actual news. And then the podcast,
and it's free as a reminder.
It's a lot of that's free. Everything I just is free except for Friends from Work Plus. So. Lots of offerings.
Yeah, find us on go to our website, go to our Substack. There's so much stuff that we're putting out that I think people that listen to the show would enjoy, and it is free and available for you. So
thoughts on Multiverse of Madness? Has it changed at all for you? Did you rewatch it recently? Any new discoveries? We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, here we go. Next week, Deadpool hype, and we're fully on the Deadpool train for a month. Thanks for listening. We'll see you right back here on Friends for More.